ready to bring up 2 copies of my presentation at once so we can compare graphs to conversation here. So we're looking at the combination of an ovarian cycle and a uterine cycle taking place over an average 28 days, where the first part is known as the follicular phase, which is day 1 to day 14, and then the latter part, which would be then the luteal phase, which we really haven't gotten all the way through just yet. So we're looking at the beginning of this ovarian cycle corresponding to the first day of menstruation. And on the diagram on the right, all right, oh, I didn't move that one. We are looking at the idea of corresponding to the first day of menstruation, going to the early follicular phase where we have our pulsatile release of GnRH at a frequency of every 60 to 90 minutes. That will trigger the release of the follicle-stimulating hormone, which will help convert a primordial into a primary. About a day or so later, LH kind of catches up, and now we have both systems running full bore, where we have this follicular structure creating low levels of estradiol to basically stimulate the granulose cells to grow, for the follicle to become bigger. And as we're becoming bigger, we're also losing some of these follicle structures. They simply just don't respond. And we started with 15 to 20, and even after a day or two, we've already lost a few of them. As time has progressed and our follicle is getting larger and the cells are more efficient, we can now start producing higher levels of estradiol than before, a level we're going to call medium levels of estradiol. And we notice that that medium level goes to hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary and tells us, okay, we've just awakened a group of primordials a couple of days ago. Let's not awaken another group of primordials because we have to see what happens to this graduating class in a sense. So we have this strong negative feedback, so we don't release very much FSH or LH. We need to see what happens to this group. And as the follicle continues to grow, we start adding fluid inside, and that fluid comes from the granulose cells. We call that the antrum. And the follicle just simply gets bigger. And now we're probably about mid-parts, and I'm actually need 3 diagrams here, to where now we're looking at, all right, menstruation has stopped, and we're right about this medium level of estradiol. So I can realize I'm beginning to regrow that stratum functionalis layer of the uterine lining, of the endometrium. And a few days later, about a day before ovulation, we're going to get our highest level of estradiol. Now, no longer doing a negative feedback, we're now doing a stimulation signal to hypothalamus, because the whole goal is to actually get the ova out of the follicle. And to do that, I need to create an environment that will cause an LH surge, because that'll trigger the follicle to do its thing. So I need high levels of estradiol to do that. I need a synergistic hormone, this is where we haven't used in quite a while, known as low progesterone. And together, low progesterone, high estradiol, lead to a lot of GnRH release. The pulsatile frequency increases to about 30 to 60 minutes from the 60 to 90. I'm going to get a large amount of LH release, and that large amount of LH will then trigger the LH surge. And we can see that on the graphs on the right, where I'm looking at my purple estradiol graph over here. And there's my high levels of estradiol with my low progesterone increase corresponding to the LH surge. And remember, that peak of that green spike doesn't happen on the dotted line, it happens just prior to it. And so I can represent the distance from the peak to the dotted line as being my 16 to 18 hour window of after the follicle receives the highest level of LH. That will trigger then the release of the ova. It'll still have some granulose cells surrounding it, called the corona radiata. And now the question is, how long will the remaining follicles keep up the production of hormones? And I also noticed that the production of hormones has increased for progesterone. Now it's my high levels of estradiol after ovulation. And I've noticed my estradiol has gone down, and progesterone has gone up. So we get our highest level of progesterone, which is the red line on our graph, and I notice my purple estradiol has lowered and gone back up a bit, but At the peak of it, high progesterone and medium-high estradiol. It's less than the high, but it's more than the medium, so it's a medium-high estradiol. And it'll continue to do this high progesterone, medium-high estradiol under two different scenarios. One is if there is no pregnancy, then I will maintain my negative feedback for only 10 to 12 days. I will then begin to shrivel and die off. My hormone production goes down. Strength of negative feedback goes down, allowing the release of GnRH and FSH, and we start all over again. But if I get a chemical signal called HCG, that's basically telling me, oh, we had a fertilization event. We actually have a developing embryo. We better not stop our negative feedback, because one of the consequences of ending the negative feedback, right, is no longer maintaining the tissue of the endometrium. That high-level progesterone helps to keep the uterine lining going, which we'll talk about maybe some tonight. So if the progesterone level is lower, that's the signal to allow the sloughing off of the endometrial lining. So I can't afford to let that drop if I have a pregnancy going. So the corpus luteum says, no, don't worry, I'll keep this up for about 60 to 90 days. That's my reserve. But by then, you better be the one producing the negative feedback signals. Now, that part makes sense. So what if the placenta and the developing embryo didn't produce HCG? What's going to happen by day 100? Maybe by day 105, 110. We're going to slough off that lining, right? So the question is really, because we really don't know, women who are sexually active, you may have been pregnant way more times than you think, at least technically pregnant. And things just didn't go right. And you had a delayed period, but you still had the period, and really you were just for a few days pregnant perhaps. We don't know. We haven't gotten that smart just yet. So far, is that making some sense? Yeah, no.
So it's the HCG that will then do the negative feedback after the 90-day
No,
period.
it's HCG tells the corpus luteum to survive for 90 days. It's the embryo
Okay.
that does the negative feedback.
Okay.
All right? You guys over here all right?
So this is part of this guesstimate that 2/3 of fertilization events don't result in a birth, kind of?
Yeah, it might be. Yeah.
I mean, it's a wild guesstimate, right?
All right, if you guys are quiet, I'm going to push on. It's like a wedding. All right, so what does this LH surge allow to happen besides the idea of a ovulation event? This LH surge allows us to have a few more things happening. One is we're going to complete meiosis 1. That's a little better. Which means finish prophase 1, get into metaphase, anaphase, telophase, cytokinesis, and start up meiosis 2. And then a big but. You're going to stop at metaphase 2, which is kind of redundant since we already said meiosis 2. But we finish meiosis 1, start meiosis 2, and then you put the brakes on it again at metaphase. Another halting mechanism. And then 3, we've already mentioned, that was the first thing we talked about, was the actual active ovulation. The release of the ova from the follicle. We got to keep you guys on the same path. So I want you guys to take about a minute, look through your notes, and really if you have any kind of a question like, I'm not getting this at all, I need you to ask a question today so you'll have clear understanding or clearer for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday studying. Take a moment, go through it, and if there's something that you just didn't quite get, didn't understand, I didn't say it clearly enough or in a way that's understandable, so I can try and clear that up before we do anything else.
So the HCG is inhibiting the.
No,
Okay. The M.
no, back to this. It's simply a signal that tells the follicles, don't die. Please don't leave. And it'll do it for no more than a total of 60 to 90 days.
And then then after the 60 to 90 days, it becomes the corpus album.
Yep, right there.
Okay, so the HCG is what's causing the follicle cells to keep a high level of progesterone. Otherwise, if it went low, that's what would cause like menstruation to happen again or like sloughing off.
Yep.
So for it to stay like that for the 60 to 90 days, that's so that the ovum can like mature enough to be able,
Well, so now the embryo.
the embryo, yeah.
Yeah, because once you have fertilization, now we're going to have an embryo.
Right, and then you said that it could do it on its own after that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It becomes the source of all the different estradiols, all the other hormones that are coming out of that, which we're not even going to begin to get into.
Okay.
So in the early follicular phase, the part with the green arrow, slide 3. So you had the little green arrow as a paracrine signal of low levels of estradiol to the granulosa cells. And what was making the low levels of estradiol?
The granular cells.
They're just signaling themselves
Yeah,
Okay.
and their neighbors.
and their neighbors. Great. And so then, when does that start stimulating the? That's just making them grow and replicate.
Mhm.
That's all that's doing.
That's all it's doing.
So that's not talking to the pituitary.
Nope.
and the-
Just 'cause- is there any arrows going to pituitary?
No, that's what I was asking.
Yeah, I mean, just try and take it literally. Mr. Scott?
Is it that androgens and aromatase making the estradiol? Or what were those?
Yeah, androgens are the precursors. Aromatase is then that converts the androgens into estradiol.
So the fecal cells make the androgens, and the granulosa cells make the aromatase. And
Mhm.
together, that allows the granulosa cells to make the estradiol that they signal, which
Yeah.
triggers their replication and the increase in size of the follicles, the maturation of the follicles. Okay.
The rest of you that are being really, really quiet are okay?
That's going from the primordial to the primary.
Mhm.
So then is the estradiol levels go up further because the follicles get bigger and get better at producing it, right? That's the
Yeah.
mid-follicular phase. It starts to, I assume it escapes into the bloodstream in sufficient quantities that it then has its inhibiting effect on the pituitary and
Mhm.
the neuroendocrine cells.
Yeah.
Okay.
The rest of you that are not saying anything, you're all right?
So then,
Those of you that aren't responding in any way at all?
so why is it that a medium level of estradiol inhibits GnRH?
That's for you guys to think about over the weekend.
And a high level.
That's for you guys to think about over the weekend. That's your thought question. I was gonna actually have you guys think on.
Were you gonna like cut up some rat brains over
I don't
there or
know.
something?
Scott?
I would try to see if I can ask properly. So after
Yeah, so.
the egg leaves,
Folks, listen up.
what? Right after the oocyte, or after it leaves the follicle, it's the cells in the ovary itself, in the corpus luteum, that are producing
That's what I said, the follicle cells are the ones that are always making the hormones.
as the egg's leaving.
Right, now the ovary isn't making the hormones.
Okay.
They're talking to the granular cells, but they're not making the hormones.
Alright, just keeping that.
All right, let's try Mary.
It's kind of random, but how are twins? Like, what happens with
What kind of twin?
not identical?
Well, that's just 2 eggs released.
Maybe-
You have you have 2 of these that do that. 2 of them actually survived. And you release 2 eggs. That's why they can be twins but look nothing alike. because they have a whole different sets of DNA, both in the ova and the sperms that fertilize them.
And the cycle will be like the same.
Yeah, exactly the same. You just release two.
What about identical twins? When do they split?
So that's when the ova splits into two, and we get technically exact copies of genetic material. But that's where you have one ovulation, and at some early stage, early on, it actually splits into two separate cells.
But like
To get-
when? Like, does it matter when?
Oh, it does matter when.
It's like-
You have to do it very early on. The fewer the number of the cells, the less chance of a screw up. So probably when you are a 2-cell, 4-cell group, before you know the terms blastula and morula? Before you even are blastula, which is a ball of cells, you have to split into two. So we're talking days after you got fertilized.
And then you have to be fertilized by 2.
No. So the idea is that if you are an identical twin, you had one ova, so your mom, you ovulate, you got fertilized egg, and that egg splits into two. It was one, but it splits into two.
After it's fertilized.
After it's fertilized, yes. Yep. All right, let's do this. The next time you guys think you have had a bad day, I want you to realize, you know, my day wasn't quite as bad as this guy's day. Taz, what am I going to show?
Well, I wonder if that's what my old biology teacher had talked about, where.
I don't know. What did he talk about?
Well, he had talked about how, and maybe this is how, gosh, I don't know, how his like wife or girlfriend had ended up.
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
Nope.
Oh.
All right, so keep in mind, the theme of this is A, it's the day before a holiday, but 2, when you've had a bad day, realize your bad day wasn't as bad as this poor little guy's. Oh, don't jump! No, don't do it!
My levels of cortisol.
Boom!
That's so cool. Look at this skydive.
And a controlled drop. This is as good a descent as it's possible to make.
It's still falling. Hope there's a pool under me. Oh! That's kind of smart. Ooh, ooh,
He stopped
It's
himself.
okay.
ooh.
He's got it.
Oh, you can do it. I'm excited to see you tie this in.
Gotta hear the noises.
Little baby.
It's a little morbid.
Oh, keep watching. I'm waiting to show you something sad.
It's gonna be okay.
Mom.
Its parents are there to meet it.
Oh, so sweet. Rescue the baby up there.
It's right there.
A little dazed, perhaps, but all in one piece.
Future reference.
One gosling at least hasn't made it. And this chick appears to be in a bad way.
Get up, get up, get up.
At last, it responds to its mother's calls.
You did it.
there are still chicks unaccounted for, somewhere.
Now they do it about the same way as these guys. Go away.
Once hatching is underway, the nest is a busy place and noisy. All that vocalizing promotes a family bond as the ducklings get used to the sound of their mother's voice.
That's imprinting.
She won't stay in the nest for long though. Within hours of the last egg hatching, the ducklings are home alone. Their mother's not far away, and her calls are the only thing that could entice them to abandon their cozy nest. Barely a day old, they can't fly up to the entrance, so instead, they climb. They're equipped with strong claws just for this purpose. When they reach the opening, their first view of the outside world must come as quite a shock. It's a 5-story drop. But somewhere down below, their mom is urging them to leave the only home they know, so they can live the life they were born for. And that persuades them to do something that seems a little crazy. Some ducklings aren't as bold as others. And even Petax gets a push. Finally, driven by instinct and joined to one another by an inseparable bond, they all take the plunge.
It's raining baby ducks. And the reason both groups survive is because they're mainly cartilage. They don't have very many bones just yet. That's also a really good way for your mom and dad to keep the babies away from predators, because the predators can't reach them. But there's a cost to every decision you make, and the cost is if you can jump 585 feet down on rocks and you survive as a barnacle goose, watch eyes as lights get turned on, then you have a good chance of surviving. Because predators can't reach where the nest is. But the predators have figured out that there's usually a week or two where it's raining babies, and so Arctic foxes are just waiting for them at the base of the cliffs. So it's a quick run to the ocean. And it's not uncommon to see Arctic foxes with 3 or 4 chicks in their mouths. So you gotta realize this, right? Everybody has the right to feed their babies, including Arctic foxes. It's just the way nature works. So we'll see you guys in the lab.